Hello and welcome to Advanced MarketPlace Symantec-Mykrobel webinar on utility and energy cybersecurity issues. Robert Bellemare will present on the cybersecurity threat landscape and the specific implications this environment has on the utility market in particular. Robert has nearly 30 years of experience in the utility industry. Bob was a founder and served as CEO of a utility industry advisory and market research firm whose major practice area was providing analyst, advisory, and benchmark services related to utility IT and smart grid systems.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to discuss this important topic. I'm Bob Bellemere. I'm Chief Operating Officer of Mykrobel, and I've been in the utility business almost 30 years, having worked in all parts of the business from generation on down to distribution, transmission, substations, and the like. So my background's largely in electric utilities as well as some gas and the like. Been involved with IT issues and in a variety of ways, and throughout my career in system operations, we of course had to interact with areas like ERCOT and Southwest Power Pool, PJM, and the like. I had a sister company one time that was involved in data centers and security work in that environment in the utility space, and worked on smart grid issues. We've also been involved with utilities on benchmarking back office type costs and surveying the industry on best practices. So in preparation for this discussion today, AMP and Symantec asked that we put together a document and presentation material on some background information on what's happening with cybersecurity issues in the utility industry. And that document is available to you. You might see it on your screen right now, where you can download it, or after the webinar, we'll be happy to send it to you. And it basically covers the slides that I'm about to go over. And what I'd like to share with you is some of the trends, mainly from an analyst perspective, that I picked up on in preparing this document. So with that, I'd like to go to the first slide here. And one of the things for those of us in the industry have been experiencing in the last decade or so is increasing touch points, I think, with the external world and an ever more complex IT infrastructure. We have a variety of entities we have to interact with, as well as within our own utilities, and this has created numerous vulnerability points of coordination, and the like. So obviously a growing issue in the industry is to how to secure this network, how to prevent attacks, and then of course no system is 100% reliable, so we also have to think about how to recover if someone makes its way into these systems. So as I was talking to AMP and Symantec about this topic, and they were describing the solutions, which Mark Robinson, my colleague here, who will be presenting next, the way they were talking about it, it kind of hit me that it's very similar to the reliability standards we already have in the industry, where we try to protect against and make sure no single event or realistic combination of events will create a situation that we cannot recover from. And so it's kind of the theme throughout our discussion today. So one of the issues is, we fly by wire most of the time, and how do we have our hydraulic backups basically in place so that we can recover and not hopefully miss a beat if we do have some sort of attack on our systems. The challenge in this industry at a very high level is we're a very fragmented industry. We have over 3,000 electric utilities, 1,500 or so gas distribution utilities, 4,600 water sewer type utilities. And here I show you some of the stats just from the electric industry that are readily available, just to give you an idea of the types of entities. So we have investor-owned utilities, which are few in number but large in size. They serve roughly 62% of the country. Electric cooperatives, close to 1,000 of them, but they only serve 13% of the country. And municipalities make up the bulk of the remainder, a couple thousand of them, and serving about 17%. of the country in the electric industry. And we have a few federal authorities and other types. So it's a very fragmented business, yet we're all interconnected in some form or fashion. So, a problem in one system can cascade into others, and that's not been lost, I think, on those in the security world. So a lot of things have been happening in order to try to ensure that we can operate our systems yet have a reliable form of interconnection. Looking at some of the public available data on the issues in the cybersecurity world, this is a chart that was from the April to June 2013 Monitor report from the Industrial Control Systems Cyber Emergency Response Team, Department of Homeland Security. And a couple of things struck me when comparing this chart to even the year prior. One is, well, in both cases, the energy industry is the main target of the reported instances. As you see here, 53% of the instances they had to investigate or participate in were in the energy area. And even if you look over and see some of the other parts of the pie, you'll see things like nuclear is included there and water. So, the instances are concentrated in the energy sector. And the other thing is that in the first 8 months of fiscal year 2013, the total number of these instances exceeded already the prior year. So it shows that there's an increasing number of attacks or instances coming into our utility sector and energy sector. So here's some other statistics that that might help you get motivated or help share in a business plan of some type to, when you're trying to justify how you're deploying resources within your company. In 2012, there were over almost 200,000 cyber incidents involving federal agencies and critical infrastructure. And according to the government, this is a 68% increase from 2011. In a recent survey, which I'll get into more, a utility was reporting that they were getting approximately 10,000 cyber attacks each month. And another Midwestern power provider indicated its systems were under daily threat. And a lot of this activity was automated and, according to them, adapting to what was discovered in their probing process. So pretty sophisticated activity going on out there. And some of it appears to be in the gathering of information stage for who knows what purpose. In this slide, I provide some real-world examples that you can find out there in different places as to more of the high-profile type activity or attacks that have happened in the energy and utility sector. Just to give you a couple of examples. One of them was in late 2012. This one's kind of innocent, but had a big effect. A power generation company realized that something had somehow its systems were infected, and it turned out to be simply from a technician's USB drive. But while they had to, resolve that and figure out what was causing it and the like, it was like a 3-week extension to the outage, and that can be very costly for those of you who know the power generation side. Depending on what the replacement power costs are and things like that, those can easily add up to hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more, millions, depending on which unit is affected. So in that case, it wasn't purposeful, but yet the result was pretty serious. In March of 2012, Homeland Security identified a campaign of cyber intrusions targeting natural gas pipeline companies. And this was through spear phishing emails that dated back to 2011. So it had been going on for several months. And the report was that they were highly targeted at taking sensitive information and sensitive knowledge about the control systems that they felt could be used for unauthorized operations of those systems. The good news there is that so far No one's acted on that information, but apparently it was going on for several months of collecting some of these vulnerabilities. Last year, we also had Telvan Canada, which is now Schneider Electric, realized that it had a breach of its internal firewall and security systems. And the suspicion was that this was from hackers from China known as the Comment Group was targeting them. And according to the reports, they were breaching the network and installing malware and stole some project files related to SCADA, which is, I'll talk a little more about. As most people know, that's kind of the nerve center of our real-time control systems, and so SCADA is obviously one of those areas where we have a lot of concerns as far as securing. Another turbine system was infected in October 2012. Again, a third-party technician here with the USB port. Let's see. And then a lot of this got started, as I think many of you are aware, with the Aurora simulated generation attack, which I put the link here if you haven't seen they actually got so much awareness that I think it was on a 60 Minutes episode. This is where the government actually ran a simulation where they did destroy a generator purposely, showing the vulnerabilities of the system. So a lot of instances, and then an oil company, of course. Here's another example where an attack was made on Saudi Aramco, which destroyed the hard drive in 2012 of over 30,000 computers. So lots of types of attacks going on out there, and a number of instances. I imagine most of them are pretty benign, but certainly we see escalation of some of the types of instances here. One of the concerns, as I mentioned, is of course SCADA. These are the nerve centers of our systems. They telemetry our system and tie into our real-time controls. As many of you might know, we used some of this vulnerability to our advantage when it came to Iran. We developed the United States and it's believed Israel developed this Stuxnet virus that jumped from machine to machine until it found a very specific Siemens SCADA system that was used in Iran's nuclear enrichment programs. And what it was designed to do and did do was to cause the centrifuges to operate at a very high and then very low speeds, which caused them the tubes in them to expand and contract, and a pretty clever way of destroying some of the enrichment facilities. But that same concept can be applied in reverse, of course, into our systems. You can develop very specific things to attack very, very specific type systems. And there was a project called SHINE conducted in 2012 where they went out and used Shodan to locate critical infrastructure devices such as SCADA and demonstrate how easily it was to actually identify and find the devices that are interconnected to our critical infrastructure. And they counted up over 7,200 devices, and that's the chart you see here where they mapped them out, that were interconnected in some way to the web or accessible in that manner. So I don't think these issues are lost on the industry, and in 2006, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission designated NERC as the Electric Reliability Organization under Federal Power Act. The regulatory framework resulted in mandatory and enforceable what are called Cybersecurity Critical Infrastructure Protection SIP standards, is the acronym used in the industry. And there's over 1,900 entities in North America in the bulk power system area that are subject to those standards. Violating a standard can result in financial penalties up to $1 million per day per violation. And I looked up the NERC 2013 statistics year to date, and 4 of the 5 top most violated reliability standards are SIP related. So the other standards or more physical infrastructure related. So this is obviously a very serious issue, and I know some of the utilities I work with and hear feedback on say, these are getting more and more challenging to meet these standards. And in reality, they're really your first line of defense. There's obviously other vulnerabilities we have, but nevertheless, the industry is taking definite steps forward in trying to secure the infrastructure. Some of the efforts going on at NERC that you might be aware of, they have the Electricity Sector Information Sharing and Analysis Center, where utilities can share their experiences and issues that they want feedback on or input on. And coming up, there is GridX simulation that several utilities, about 100 or so, will be participating in order to test their readiness for cyber attacks and the like. Now, these standards are very challenging, and some issues I've been involved with are some of the smaller companies are actually looking at selling off some of their infrastructure on the transmission side in order to, they just can't feel like they can't comply. That it's something that is best left for bigger entities. So it's actually having a consequence not only in how we secure things, but also entities are looking at, hey, do I really want to be part, or how do I be part of that interconnected infrastructure? There was a survey done by Congressman Markey and Waxman earlier this year on industry practices. Now, these are congressmen who have been interested in codifying a lot of these cybersecurity requirements at a federal level in a legislative sense, although that has not occurred. But they did have a very good sample set, I thought, of utilities that they interviewed on their practices. And what I have are a few slides to demonstrate some of what is going on in industry right now. And what they did is they broke the results of the survey out into the major types of utilities: investor-owned utilities, municipal and cooperative-owned, and then federal entities. And then they asked utilities, what, are they complying with certain standards, some of them voluntary, some of them involuntary or mandatory, such as the stucknet measures. And you can see most of the utilities comply, of course, with the mandatory measures. But on the voluntary side, you have less compliance or less interest in complying. Only about a third of the utilities, or half, were putting in measures to address what are called voluntary type standards. Personnel screening, we can do a lot on the electronic side, but as most people know, one of your biggest vulnerabilities is who's actually sitting in front of these systems. And here you have an interesting set of results. The investor-owned utilities reported out, again, the larger type utilities, that they have standards consistent with FERC in terms of screening personnel and that type. Municipalities and co-ops, a little over half were reporting compliance with that. Interestingly, the federal authorities, these would be entities like, although I can't recall which one responded, but these would be like Bonneville Power Administration alike. Only 2 out of 8 had personnel screening practices in place. So a lot of, kind of a mixed bag here, and in terms of practices. And on the next slide, what we have here, which I thought was interesting, was how many employees are dedicated to these functions within a utility. So with IOUs, you see, as you would expect, a larger number of employees, but yet only 6 of them reported having 1 to 5 employees, 4, 6 to 10, 1 employee, or 1 reported having 11 to 15. So generally, fairly small staffs dedicated to this issue. And the smaller you are, it looks like the smaller your staff, as you would expect. I think the challenge here is, obviously this has to be an error-free environment. So how do we have enough resources? How do we make sure we have enough resources dedicated to this function. So while it's gotten a lot of attention, it doesn't appear, based on this survey, that there are a lot of dedicated resources being applied to the matter. And one of their critiques, and again, this is because they were interested in federal legislation, but they feel like while NERC and FERC are doing a good job, it is a lengthy process in order to develop standards. And one question that comes up is, are we really, as an industry, moving as fast as those who might want to do us harm? At the federal level, because of, I think, they haven't been able to get legislation developed that there's a consensus on, there has been some other measures put in place in order to create some carrots and sticks to get the industry and critical infrastructure industries moving along this path. As most of you are probably aware, in February this year, President Obama issued an executive order as well as a president directive related to critical infrastructure security and resilience. They directed NIST to develop a cybersecurity framework in order to identify and implement best security practices for the critical infrastructure sectors. And they also were directed to, or the Homeland Security was directed to establish a voluntary program to promote the adoption of a cybersecurity framework and to work with industry to assist companies in implementing the framework. What are some of the sticks and carrots? On the stick side, the DOE, Department of Energy, will be reporting to the President on an annual basis which owners and operators of critical infrastructure are implementing the voluntary security framework. The carrots, although I don't think they're well defined, actually much of this still has to be defined from what I can tell, is, as recent as August of this year, the White House was proposing incentives, and this includes cybersecurity insurance, priority considerations for grants, and streamlined regulations for those who implement quote-unquote voluntary type approaches to this matter. Some of you may be familiar with a model that was released in May 2012. So that they are working on developing tools that industry can use, and some what's been started in the electric industry is being looked at, I think, to be used in other industries, and this is called the ESC2 Model, which you can find if you go out there and look for it, if you're looking to do an assessment of your readiness and practices. And so what they did was divide the IT security issue up into 10 areas of processes, so that you can assess where you are in each of these key areas of securing your infrastructure. And what the model does is gives you a way to assess your capabilities, and it's again organized into 10 domains, like you see here, and it contains 4 maturity indicator levels, or MILs they call them, and it's on a scale of 0 to 3, so 0 being I guess no practice whatsoever, and you can see here 1, 2, and 3 would be a way to benchmark yourself against industry average and the range of scores that you have. So it's meant to be a tool so that you can assess your capabilities in these security areas and benchmark yourself against industry average and best practices. Now, I find that kind of interesting because obviously with security, even one mistake or one flaw is not acceptable. So it's an interesting thing. Should you, as far as an internal perspective, I would imagine many companies would want to be able to score a 3 on all metrics. But clearly as an industry, I don't think anyone's quite there yet. So this is a tool you can use in order to assess your security readiness. And here's just an example that I found from, one of the outputs of within one of these areas. It goes down as you peel the onion layers, you get more and more detail. And these are some of the ways you can assess your readiness. So, this was a quote from FERC Chairman Jon Wellinghoff last year, and I think this is what, is the uneasiness of the industry, being fragmented, being so many entities, at the federal level. This was his quote, that if there was a cyber threat that was revealed to him, there's little they could do to ensure that the threat was mitigated effectively by utilities that were targeted. So I think there's increasing, cooperation and integration at all parts of the industry, but obviously much more needs to be done. And I appreciate the difficulty here, in that having worked on the business side a lot, and oftentimes the IT function needs to create a workable system, but in order to do that, it creates vulnerabilities. And kind of the analogy I use here is, we could have speed limits that are 10 miles an hour, and then we would have no accidents, but that's not the result we want, because then no one will use the roads. In other words, we won't have functionality. I'd like to thank everybody for coming, and if you have any questions after the event, please feel free to submit them, or any comments or critique. We'd appreciate it. Thank you.